Okay, hello, welcome to another Jenkins X office hours. We have some interesting discussions that are going to happen today. I think we're going to have a little talk about some of the enhancements, the process that we've been looking at within Jenkins X, some of the work that's been going on there, and some of the experiments that we've been trying out. So that's specifically to do with extending, integrating the add-on process or the app process from Jenkins X with JX boot. So we've been looking at that. We've also got highly anticipated demo from Andrew Bayer. This is to do with, well, do you want to do a quick TLDR? You can do it later, but what is it exactly that we're going to see?
I want to show off JX Convert Jenkins file, which is a very early, limited in what it can do exactly, translator from static master Jenkins files to Jenkins X.yml. I have to throw many, many caveats on it, but in many cases, it will do the right thing for you. And when it can't, it will help you understand what it can't do.
Awesome.
So,
yes, so there's there's a few excited people I can see on the call here. Brilliant. Well, so we'll do that shortly. And there's also some good news as well. So we'll be going on to some updates from a few people as well. So I think just to kick things off, I could probably see if I can get my, share my screen a second. Let's do this one. Alrighty. Okay, so for folks that haven't seen this, so a little quick recap. We are looking to introduce some more of a lightweight process around enhancement features, introducing features with Jenkins X, finding a way that we can kind of get some more collaboration early on in, say, a design area. If people have any ideas or thoughts, they can kick something off, rather than just maybe specifically with GitHub issues, maybe that's too late on in the process. If we want to have some bigger ideas, then we're looking at a way to kind of express this and describe this and get these early collaborations. So with that said, we have a enhancements Git repository, which we'd like to, again, we're going to constantly try to improve this, so feedback is always welcome about the process, including the actual enhancements that get created. But it would be good to try and spend a little bit of time each office hours to kind of go through any enhancements that are here, any pull requests that are existing here. If anybody wants to talk or present any of them, I think it would be really, really good. James has already added two, so we've had some really good feedback on those already. And so we have this kind of enhancements repo. One of the enhancements that we've been looking at is how do we extend JX boot to be able to work with the app framework that we have within Jenkins X. So almost describing a number of apps or add-ons, whatever we call them, up front in the JX boot process. And so when we kick off the JX boot, it'll actually install all of our charts. It'll help us maintain these this dev repository a little bit easier and have more composition within these different charts. What we've done on that is we have an experimental GitHub organization called Jenkins X Labs. There's only one repository in there at the moment. And in here, we have something called boot Helm file POC. This is all described in the enhancement proposal in here about doing some discovery around Helm file. Helm file is quite interesting because it was, first I heard about it actually was by Vincent Baha, has done some great blogs and looks up in the Jenkins X community. He's done some great blogs around how he's telling the story about the journey that they're taking with Dailymotion, and they're using Jenkins X, and they were using Helm. They've been using Helm file. Helm file is a way to be able to almost as a wrapper, but higher level way to describe which Helm charts you want to be installed and into which namespaces. So we started having a little look at that because we had some good feedback. And we want to have a little spike at what a Jenkins X boot configuration repository would look like, swapping out rather than some of the JX implementations we have. So JX boot would actually delegate to Helm file to be able to do the actual apply. I think James is going to talk us through some more of the fine details of what that repository looks like at the moment. But higher level, that's kind of what the aim is. Once we have this, the idea is to be able to then easily describe extra apps, like whether you might want Istio or Glue or various other add-ons that you have in a YAML file up front for your boot process to then automatically install. This is kind of where the reasoning we're going for this. I think this Helm file, one other interesting fact as well, which is it is all experimental. Just wanted to make sure that is known, but anybody can come in here and have a little play at the moment. We're actively working on this and improving these docs. There's some manual steps you have to do, but obviously we're going to look to improve those. And you can see they've got these Helm file commands. There's a link to Helm file here. There's a ton of really, really good examples and documentation. So I'd encourage anybody to have a look at this. We're actually becoming quickly big fans of Helm file. One of the other reasons is because it actually, out of the box, is now we've been using Helm 3. So the example that we've got kind of working, is actually doing a boot install using Helm file to describe all of the charts and install a base Jenkins X installation. James, do you want to maybe talk through, say, the repo a little bit, and I'll see if I can get the demo.
Yeah, let me share my screen. See if this works. I've just upgraded my Mac, so I might have to do all kinds of security things. Oh God. It might take me a while to get Zoom to let me share my screen. Bear with me 1 second. Oh, I've got to quit Zoom. I'll tell you what, do you want to share, let's just use your screen share, James. It's going to take me a while to get this working at my end. I was really just going to mention how very similar this POC is to what we do with boot already. If you look in the, James, are you sharing your screen, or has my Zoom just decided to go strange?
Is it me?
No, I've lost.
No,
I can't hear either, James.
We lost a couple Jameses. They're both gone.
I'm sure they'll come back in a moment.
Yeah.
He said it's a spike, so it's not supposed to work from the first attempt.
I saw that Kai and Mark were still here, so we didn't lose all of the UK. Oh, and Cara. So, you know, at least that's something.
What happened?
You both vanished.
I blame James's demo that he was about to do.
Well, he's still not back, so. Oh no, he's back now.
So have you done your demo? Well, my Mac decided to restart Zoom.
It happened to me as well, so I don't know what happened. Maybe anyone called James just kicked out.
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was just going to really just show what's pretty much the same as boot. So boot has a pipeline, like a Jenkins X.yml. It has a requirements file, so that's all the same. We haven't really changed the requirements file. The pipeline's changed a little bit. It's much simpler than before, but let's not worry about that. That's an implementation detail. The main thing we did in the traditional Jenkins X boot config is we have an N folder, and then everything's one big Helm chart, and then there's a requirements YAML that adds everything in. If I look at Jenkins X boot config, the way this works under the covers is we have this magic N folder And inside the end folder, this is really a big chart. It's a chart YAML, and there's a requirements YAML where all your different charts are listed. So that's what we do today with Boot. What we've done with the Helm file version is almost the same. We have a folder called apps rather than env, and we have a Helm file rather than the requirements file. And inside, don't worry about the Helm file bits, like these bits at the top, but focus on the releases section. The releases section is kind of like the requirements section. So if I open these at the same time, you'll kind of see they're very similar. Oh, crap. Come on, Chrome, don't do weird things to me. So this is the dependencies of the YAML, and this is the Helm file version. So we have a list of charts, we have a list of repository names. There's some extra stuff where we can give custom values files to charts, which is kind of useful. Whereas traditionally in traditional Boot, we used to have we do have a folder with YAML files in. So we've got the same kind of thing in the Helm file version versus the traditional Boot version. So we basically have charts with additional extra overrides of values. So it's pretty much the same. The only difference is this version is using Helm file. Now, the interesting thing is when you run Helm file, and I think James is about to show you it running, what's interesting is Helm file installs each chart independently as a separate Helm release, so that you see, you can do things like Helm file diff, so you can see what's the difference before you run Helm file, so you can see I'm about to update 2 charts out of 10. You can see which version of each chart is and which is upgraded and downgraded. So it's a bit, rather than just having one massive env chart, you can see each individual thing. Plus, if I delete something or add something and I run Helm file again, it deletes and adds things nicely, which is good. And it's also pretty quick, but the big win is all of this works with Helm 3. So we can go straight to Helm 3 with Helm file. This seems to be kind of working. Because this is all a bit different, we've been through all of the different charts that make up Jenkins X, and we've tried to simplify. Now, if you look at the boot config of the current requirements file, look at this one. It's fairly busy, but we have a Jenkins X platform chart. And Jenkins X platform was traditionally this kind of big glue Git repository that takes a whole bunch of charts and then adds this extra kind of glue stuff. Then when we started Boot, we added this other chart that adds Boot-specific resources. So we have these two kind of weirdy charts. What we did with this is we made a new version of Jenkins X Boot Helm file resources. And that's got everything that's needed from the platform stuff and the Boot resources. So it's one single, simpler chart, which has no dependencies other than JX. So rather than bundling like Nexus and Chart Museum and all these other kind of things inside this big Uber chart Jenkins X platform, we've now just got lots of little components which you can add and remove whenever you feel like. They're all completely independent from each other. And then this is the one magic Helm chart, which kind of glues everything together, which if I show you that one, Boot Helm file resources. It's a single Helm chart, as most are, so it's a single Helm chart. And you'll see the only dependency it has is on the JX chart. And the only reason that dependency is there is for adding all the GC jobs and the controllers. So we have one dependency here that is not this big Uber Helm chart, but it does have quite a lot of resources in here. If I look in here, it's got quite a lot of resources. So these are the resources for things like pod templates and Maven settings and environments and source repositories and everything. One other change with this chart, by the way, that's kind of interesting. There's a current restriction on JX Boot that it's kind of hard-coded for dev, staging, and production. We now support handling any kind of set of environments, from no environments to 1 environment to 10 environments. To test this out, I added a little test library, by the way. So we've got a little Go test thing, which if you just run this, you figure out where your Helm chart is and you point at where the test data is. It generates a unit test for all of your Helm charts, which generates, it asserts that all your test cases match the generated code. And if I show you this example, here's a custom version of this chart where we pass in this JX requirements with some example secrets. And here's the environments. We define 4 environments: dev, custom, another, and production. Which Boot can't handle. Boot kind of goes weird if you give it random different names of environments. And if we look at the, come out here, if you look at the expected values that get generated, and we look inside the Jenkins X namespace and environments, you'll see these are the 4 environments that get created if I run this Helm chart. And if I look at the environment for the custom, we see we create an environment. It's called custom. It's a permanent environment. It's got a label called custom. It's using the custom namespace, and it's using a custom Git repository. So anyways, a bit of a deep dive there, but the basic idea is this new version of boot is still experimental, but it works with Helm 3, and it almost works. We could just about run pipelines now. But from an implementation perspective, it's much, much simpler. It's just a bunch of separate charts. You can override the charts if you want with anything Jenkins X specific. Otherwise, they're just vanilla charts. So it's a bit like the app stuff where we took off-the-shelf apps, off-the-shelf charts, and customized them slightly to work better in Jenkins X. We can kind of do the same thing here. And so far, it seems to be working really well. James, do you want to have a try, see if yours will work?
Yeah, well, I can just go back and share my screen. But what's also interesting, something that James said there, it's actually doing in many ways, what we were looking to do traditionally with JX steps in the pipeline, where we're templating different parts of different areas and passing values in, which as your install process goes along, you need to set different values. So it's actually much cleaner, but using another open source project to be able to do all the things that we were trying to do in JX code. So as an example, when Helm 3 came along, rather than us having to make a change to Helm 3, Helm file just did it. And with us relying on Helm file, it's easier for us to put in those changes. So it's actually, it's one of the other benefits as well, is using another open source project, which I think has like 1,300,000 stars on it. It's being used. It seems quite good. And so far, I've got to say, I'm actually enjoying, I don't know about you, James, but I'm quite enjoying using it.
Yeah, it's really quite fun. We've had quite a lot of complexity in the implementations of Jenkins X, just from historic reasons. We have the Jenkins X platform chart, and there's all these other charts. Then we have the boot config. What's kind of interesting is when you start working on the boot config, you can embed local charts as well. You can, rather than just always using releases of charts. So I've been hacking on the JX boot Helm file resources chart. And so I've got one Git clone of that chart, and I can just reference it by source code locally inside the boot config. So I don't have to keep releasing charts and then testing them in the boot config. I can just use local charts inside Helm file, which is awesome. So Helm file can either reference a released chart, or it can just reference a folder on the file system, which is super, super useful. It's also pretty quick, it seems.
It does. There's a thing called Helm. It might not do it now. Helm file diff. And what it'll do is actually do a diff of any changes. So any updates that might have been released. We need to look at integrating it with our version streams. But it'll actually then do a diff of any changes against the state in the cluster and the file system as well, which is really got a little diff of what changes it would actually make if we actually did an apply here. So there's lots of good things that's kind of coming out.
By the way, I would love any pull request on a development environment. I would love the diff command to be ran automatically and posted to the pull request. So if anybody makes a pull request in the dev environment or staging, whatever, the pull request would say, here's what will change if you merge it. That would be awesome.
So Kai, in a similar way, we've been doing some Terraform script stuff, and there's an internal process at Cloudbeat actually, where for operations to be able to apply these plans, is that the right term? It has to be in the pull request. So in a similar kind of way.
Yeah.
To that, yeah, and it's handy, right, Kai?
Yeah, very good. I mean, it's something that Gareth Evans has worked on. There's posts back into the comments of that PR.
Yeah, brilliant.
I might have an example now that I can share.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Whilst you're digging that out, okay, that was a big diff, I guess. But the idea is JX Boot is just integrated with this. There is a couple of interesting things with upgrades at the moment. So as James said, this is experimental, but we've only really been looking at this for a week. So it's quite interesting. Oh, and for anybody that's going to be working on Helm 3 isn't familiar with Helm 3, all of your, it took me a little while to realize that I guess the state of that Helm uses, because it doesn't use tiller anymore, it's actually all in secrets. So within each namespace. So you delete the namespace and you lose everything. But it's quite nice.
Is there anything in there around being able to roll back releases of the dev pipeline using?
Yeah, there is. Well, there's a couple of things. There's something called, there's an atomic option within Helm file, but it hasn't, I'm not sure if it fails, it just doesn't install. I don't think it actually does a rollback. I haven't seen anything else, but it's not to say it isn't there. I'd have a look on that Helm file. Let's have a little look. Rollback. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Helm file and customize. So maybe there is something there. Well, that's only one reference, so maybe not. But I guess with us as well, it's interesting to be able to, because maybe tighter integration with the GitOps, so that if anything wants to fail, because you actually can get events out of this as well. I haven't played with that at all, but maybe we could detect when there is a problem. Maybe we perform our GitOps operation rollback as well, if need be, maybe.
Are we likely to hit more merge conflicts if everything is in that one file?
Well, interestingly, what we are actually looking at, another thing from Helm 3 is there's no concept of a requirements file anymore. So everything has, you can't do like these Uber umbrella charts in the traditional way of Helm 2. So everything has to be an actual chart. You can't have a folder with a folder of templates and that just get automatically applied. So we have to extract everything out and be an actual version chart, which is, unless you're developing locally, as James described. So actually, I think one of the motivations for this was to make it a bit more modular, a lot more componentized, and not as much information in these boot config repos, because we know we have seen a few merge conflicts and a lot of changes. We want to be minimizing the change to those boot config repos and keeping it to just versions, really. We actually already have a number of different boot config repos, which we're already trying to sync changes across, which is becoming a little bit of a management maintenance issue. So rather than doing that, we just want to be able to reference charts, and I think this is going to help. Yeah, so that was this. This was the code there. I would say anybody having a look, have a look at the proposal. So again, feedback would be greatly appreciated. We'll be updating some of the discovery information. That's on the enhancements repo. There is also the Jenkins X Labs GitHub organization with single repo of boot Helm POC. Give it a go if you're interested. Let us know how you get on. Any questions on Slack channels. And then there's also, it takes a little while, I must admit, it took me a couple of days digesting a lot of this information because there's so much information there, but this is the Helm file repo.
You mentioned upgrades a little bit. What are we thinking in terms of upgrade path, backwards compatibility, et cetera, so that we don't need to do yet another, guess what, there's a new install command, guess what, you need to start over.
I mean, the JX is the same, and JX boot is the same. However, moving from Helm 2 to Helm 3, they're completely incompatible. So you can't take a Helm 2 install and upgrade it to Helm 3. They're completely separate. They manage releases in totally different ways. They're completely different installations. So I don't really see people upgrading, going from the classic Jenkins boot with Helm 2 and upgrading that installation to Helm 3. I think people are either going to pick, you're either Helm 3 and Helm file, or you're classic and Helm 2.
I feel like that's not going to be sustainable or viable. I think we're going to have to try to find some form of upgrade path, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, I mean, you could upgrade your Git. In other words, you could take all your source repositories and your requirements file, and you could port that across to a clean Git repository that's based on Helm 3 and Helm file. So you could bring across your data, your requirements and your source repositories, but you should probably just try with a clean cluster. So I guess it depends what we're talking about. We should be able to move the Git code So the Jenkins X, the JX requirements file and the source repository YAMLs, and even your all of that config is identical. The thing that's totally different is the Git history of the two Git repositories and the Kubernetes clusters. So I'd start with a completely clean cluster and install Helm 3 and the Helm 3 Helm file thing. But you could copy some source code from your old Git repository into the new one.
I think we really are going to have to come up with tooling around that. I think that especially with our checkered history regarding install mechanisms, that we have to make sure that there is a well-documented, smooth on-ramp, that if it's at all possible, we can do migration. And somebody mentioned in chat that there is some kind of Helm 2 to Helm 3 migration tooling. I don't know if it would be pertinent or would work in our setup. That may be tiller dependent. But I think that we need to make sure that before we start suggesting anybody actually use any of this,
but
that
I think
we've got all that answered.
But
I think our GX step Helm apply is not Helm 2. It's not equal to Helm 2, right? It's our custom implementation of kind of Helm 3 sort of templating. So we need our own migration tool if we want to do this.
I just want to make sure that we pursue that and that we don't encourage people to do more than just playing with it until we know what we're going to do. So we don't lock ourselves into something that it turns out we can't upgrade to, while there's another option that we can upgrade to, another implementation that we could have upgraded to.
And we should be able to, for example, do an exporter that grabs your JX requirements file, grabs all the source repository CRDs, and dumps it into a Git repository that's of a different shape using Helm 3.
It still does use a JX requirements file, does it?
It's using the exact same JX requirements file. It's using the exact same CRDs under the covers, source repository, environment, and everything. So that all that's identical. It's just how it does the install.
Yeah, it's the in-cluster representation is a bit different. So it's difficult to get from one state to the other. Yeah, okay.
It would be interesting to do some, I guess, get some feedback from anybody that's done an actual production level migration from Helm 2 to Helm 3. Because this is going to be not just a Jenkins X problem; it's a bigger community problem, I think. But and maybe we can.
Are we really talking about migration from Helm 2 to Helm 3? Because we are not using Helm 2.
There is also for Helm file, for example, the Helm file 2 option. They also offer their tillerless approach, which is exactly the same approach that we were using Jenkins X, using the client-side templating. So, I guess I still think there's going to be.
We have our own labels and we manage versions of our labels. It's not the same stuff.
No, it's the concept though. What I'm trying to say is the idea of going from a Helm 2 or Helm 2 tillerless to Helm 3 is going to be, from the wider Kubernetes ecosystems, it's going to be a problem, I'm sure. So it'd be good to try and find out what other people are doing to help with that. And maybe we can help in that area as well.
Helm 2 to Helm 3, there is a plugin into Helm 3, so you can, I tested already, so you can migrate from Helm 2 to Helm 3, but you need to have proper Helm 2 installations, basically. But they are kind of, they are recommending to not migrate live services, like if they are live on Helm 2, rather do a redeployment instead of running this migration tool to do live migration of the service. Because you need to kill tiller down and stuff like that.
So even if we do have to make a fresh install of Jenkins X, still everything else in a cluster needs to stay, because we cannot expect people to move to a new cluster, not only Jenkins X, but all their applications and everything. Right? So in the worst case scenario, it would be only Jenkins X, but everything else stays. Right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, you could use Helm 2 for staging and production and just switch the cluster that's running Jenkins X over to Helm 3. There's lots of different migrations we could do here. There's the source code migration, there's the cluster migration, there's migrating just Jenkins X versus migrating staging and production and whatnot. So we could do all of these things. It's just a question of how much time we get to do to write migration tools. But I think a simple migration tool that migrates just your Jenkins X installation, so the dev cluster, basically, the dev environment. That shouldn't be that hard if we focus on the source code first. So take your source repositories, maybe even back up your pipeline activities and restore those. But don't try and migrate the output of JX step Helm apply to pretend that was a Helm 3 release. Just reinstall it in a different namespace.
Yeah, it'd be good to do another POC and just see what would be involved in it.
Yeah.
Are you volunteering there, David?
We could try our production cluster, for example.
Nope. Nope.
All right, that's really, really good discussion. That sounds like we will do, I think we'll carry on this, maybe another section in the next office hours, a bit more of an update, see if we can get some kind of spike or early idea of what an automated migration might look like, or just have a better answer at least. Okay, that was really good. So, Andrew, did you want to show us what you have with what you've been working on?
Sure thing. Let me share. All right. So a couple weeks ago, I released this. It's a plugin. Yes, the terminology is weird, but it's an additional binary that integrates with Jenkins X to attempt to convert legacy Jenkins files from static masterland to the more modern and future-facing Jenkins X YAML. It, like I said, doesn't do this perfectly. Because in large part because we can't actually perfectly convert, because there are things you can do in a Jenkins file that we very much deliberately don't allow in a Jenkins X YAML, but it will do its best and it will try to give you suggestions as to what can't be converted, why it can't be converted, what you might want to do instead. To install, well, the repo is jenkins-x /jx-convert-jenkins file. To install it, you just do this bit here to download the latest, untar it, and copy the binary jx-convert-jenkins file into your path somewhere, at which point you can invoke it either as jx-convert-jenkins file or jx-convert-jenkins file. And to use it, if you don't specify any options, it will look in the current directory that you're in for a Jenkins file and try to convert it. You can also specify the directory that it should go to. It will read the Jenkins file there and attempt to convert it to a Jenkins X YAML in the same directory. It will tell you if it hits any issues in the conversion, but it puts more of the information about any issues with the conversion inside the Jenkins X YAML. So let's take a look at some examples from the tests of Jenkins files and what they look like when they get converted. I'm not going to actually do a live demo here because this is a lot easier to read. So get in the right tab here. There we go. So this one is a very basic one. It's basically the same as an out-of-the-box Jenkins file generated from a build pack. There's nothing particularly magic about it. It's doing pretty simple things. It's a standard declarative pipeline with only a subset of all the things you theoretically can do in a Jenkins file pipeline. It only has simple when conditions that check whether we're on a PR or not. It's got an agent, but that actually ends up getting ignored because that's a Jenkins specific configuration. Here, what matters is the container step saying, oh yeah, these steps should be run in Maven, in the Maven image, meaning the builder, Maven builder. So a number of these steps don't end up getting carried over, and because they aren't actually relevant in the new world, but what it ends up converting to is this. It creates environment variables where appropriate. It knows certain credentials that it can translate into the appropriate secret within a modern Jenkins X cluster, and we'll configure them that way. Some secrets, like some environment variables, like any that are referring to another environment variable, can't be converted and are echoed here. But in practice, the ones that at least are in the standard build pack derived Jenkins files don't matter. Preview, namespace, Helm release, etc., are all set automatically by the pipeline execution, so you don't need to worry about it. So it'll create a pull request pipeline and a release pipeline, and it will translate the steps that are relevant into the equivalent syntax for Jenkins X.yml. The steps are unnamed because in Jenkins files, steps don't have names. It's all in one stage, specifying the image that we had earlier, though if you've got multiple container blocks, it knows how to deal with that and use different images for different chunks. And yeah, it just does the right thing when things are easy enough to do. And I think a lot of cases, if you haven't been making a lot of tweaks to your Jenkins file after you've created it from the build pack, you're going to get something like this. Now, there are a lot of cases that don't convert perfectly. For example, here, we've got a Jenkins file that has triggers defined. I'm not sure if there are cases out there where anybody's actually using triggers inside their static master Jenkins files, but if you are, yeah, that ain't gonna do anything. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. So let's take a look at the resulting Jenkins XYML when we have top-level options, or top-level fields that, or stage-level fields that don't translate. A comment shows up at the right place here. Since it's a top-level configuration of triggers, we put the comment inside the pipelines entry. And we say that, well, in this case, there is no, that it's not converted and there's no equivalent behavior. Everything else is the same, and the pipeline will still execute and basically do exactly the same thing that you would expect from the Jenkins pipeline. This is a slightly bad example here, but more complicated or other when types besides branch can't be translated. So here, when expression, you can just put whatever arbitrary groovy in here, and I just copy pasted stuff. So ignore that part, the branch part, that's irrelevant. But when we see a when expression or a when condition that can't be translated, there's another one somewhere else, I think. No, there isn't. We, again, add a comment saying that it has an unsupported when condition on a stage. And then we can't convert that whole stage because we can't decide whether that stage should be in the pull request pipeline or the release pipeline or not at all. And so we create an empty stage with a single dummy step that will echo out, that if you try to run this, will echo out with a rough message of what of why it can't do anything, and then exit, so that we will cause pipelines to fail explicitly rather than do something mysterious if a step or a stage as a whole cannot be converted. And we don't support that many steps because not that many steps actually translate directly. Container and dir do, because those translate directly to what image am I running these steps or this stage in, what directory am I running these steps or any of these steps in. So those can translate, but pretty much anything else that isn't SH does not translate, because Jenkins X pipelines are simply collections of shell execution. So anything more complicated or anything different, you'd need to actually write as a shell script that either you can inline inside the Jenkins XYML or preferably add to your repo and call that way. So here I have a couple imaginary steps that will not be able to be converted. And the result of trying to convert that is that we, again, have a echo and exit. and a comment. And the comment here will show not just the name of the step, that it can't be translated, and a suggestion that you go with the shell script. We'll actually show you the original Groovy so that you don't have to bounce between the Jenkins file and Jenkins X.yml to see what's going on. Oh, hold on one sec. The goal there is to make it easier for you to just look at the Jenkins X.yml and be able to make decisions about what you need to change without having to bounce to between files and say, wait, well, what was that here? And this works not just for one-line steps, it'll do the same thing for nested steps. Like, for example, the script block, which is the cheat code in Jenkins files to do non-declarative things inside your declarative pipeline. Here, I'm not actually doing anything non-declarative inside it, but when we see a script block, we actually have slightly different treatment, a little bit different message than when we see any other unsupported step. Oh, no, I changed that, so it does actually behave the same. But you can see here where we echo out we put the full original Groovy in the comment so you can see what it is that got removed. And hold on one sec. You'll note that the git checkout master, git config, and JX step git credentials don't get translated at all, because again, these are all things that are done automatically with Jenkins X pipelines. So the script is the first step in the list that we actually would translate. So it's not put at the top here because we found an error and accidentally put it at the top. It's in the correct order in the pipeline. I think I actually, yeah, we have another one down here from the release pipeline where there's one step that does get called, then we hit the script step, and then we, have to error. So hopefully that's helpful information. Again, for things that don't automatically translate, we want to give you pointers as to what you can do and tell you why it can't be translated as much as we can. And then we want to make sure you don't accidentally run the pipeline, because if we just commented out the step completely, you could go and execute the pipeline and find that, wait, it didn't do some things it was supposed to do. I would rather have it, the safety there of having it exit when it tries to do something that we weren't able to convert. I mean, ideally, you should not be running the converted files until you've read through them closely and you're sure that there aren't errors and translation problems like this. But in case you do screw up and go straight to adding it to your repo and running it, this will help because it will just exit rather than do harm. And lastly, we only translate true declarative pipelines, true declarative Jenkins files. So anything that's coming from a shared library will show up as an unsupported step. And any code that's inside the Jenkins file but outside of the pipeline block will cause the whole thing to fail to translate. And you'll get a message saying, we can't translate this. It's not a valid declarative pipeline Jenkins file. So, yeah.
Great stuff.
That's awesome.
So, like I said, this is still very early. This was largely a last half of December project. If you want to try it out and you have any issues, create an issue in the JX project with area/JenkinsFile-converter. Don't expect this to ever be perfect magic. It's a helper. It's not intended to be a tool for automated translation. It's supposed to help you understand what the structure will look like and how some of the basic constructs translate, not to just fire and forget. So I hope it can be of interest, maybe of help, and yeah, open issues if you've got any.
So yeah, so that's the best approach to anybody that's interested. Give this a go. Bit of feedback on Slack, I guess, any issues or anything. You're happy for people to kind of give it a whirl. Yeah,
Definitely.
awesome. Are you tempted to go to into the Jenkins communities yet, or would you like?
No, this is not targeted at anyone but Jenkins X users using static masters. The intent here is not to translate arbitrary Jenkins files, because it may be able to try, but for example, if you don't have the containers here, if you're not using the Kubernetes plugin for Jenkins, it's not going to have any idea what to do. It will be like, wait, what image do I put on things? So it'll end up falling back to putting Maven on things and just looking at you funny. This is very much not a general purpose Jenkins to Jenkins X tool. It is specifically designed for static master to Jenkins X YAML migration.
Perfect. I think there might have been another question, somebody.
Let me take a look at the chat.
Just while you're, I really like the nested comments. It's a really nice touch.
I was very happy about that one. Oh yes, multi-line shell steps. Ha ha ha! That was a bug actually that Vincent from Dailymotion opened. And hold on, I've got test cases for that. I've got a bunch of test cases for that because it turns out quoting is hard. Because I actually had to write a really janky parser for Jenkins files to make this work without having to pull in all of Jenkins to do it for me. So here's an example that uses a fairly standard multi-line string that Groovy supports. Here I'm using double quotes, so there's variable interpolation, but it works for triple single quotes as well. And so this pipeline will translate correctly. Let's make sure. Yep. It takes the multi-line string and turns it into a YAML multi-line string. Just that easy. Again, there's certain to be bugs with weird quote combinations I haven't thought of yet because quoting is hard, but I did try to take that into consideration.
Awesome. Great stuff. Superb, Andrew. Okay, lovely. I think we've got a few more minutes left. Cosmin, are you able to have a few minutes talking about some of the deprecation work that?
Yeah, sure. Let me quickly share my screen.
Brilliant, thanks.
Do you see something?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we started to think about deprecating some commands probably like a few months ago. I think in the context of migrating from previous installation method to boot, in the context of migrating from classic Jenkins as a main CI/CD engine to Tekton and so on. A number of commands, they start to be a bit out of our main scope. And yeah, we start to think to deprecate them. We shot some dates here, probably. I'm not sure. Some of the commands there seems to be quite used yet. Like for instance, install looks like still a lot of people are using it. Not only with classic Jenkins, but also with next generation install flag. I've seen it, which probably we want to slowly help these people migrate to boot. So yeah, there is here in the Jenkins X doc, there is this list is generated from a code where we have sort of a small kind of automation to mark a command as deprecated. So just please have a look over this list. If you see something which you really use and you have concerns, just speak up to us and we try to push the data for that stuff and try to think for replacements or whatever story we need to move forward.
To make sure that we've actually migrated all of the add-ons across so that there are
Yeah, that's a good point. But I think add-ons we still not deprecate. So if you look at the list, I haven't added add-ons yet into the list. Still, we have this add-ons versus apps story, which we need to get a bit more straight to reduce confusion and stuff like that. So add-ons, it's still, I just add this Knative build add-on, which is used for Jenkins file runner, which partially we already removed from the code. And I think a lot of people are affected by this. Also, all this stuff like Minikube, Minishift, I think it doesn't really make sense to be in Jenkins X to create these clusters. You can create them from outside using the CLI and so on. Probably the few stuff like create Spring, I would say probably we should move it in a more like UX friendly command, which kind of it's in line with quick start and so on. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Just a quick thing on that was good, by the way. Just a quick thing on the question, I think you raised it, Terry, on apps versus add-ons and all this kind of stuff. We've never quite decided what the way forward is. The Git repository that Jay's mentioned right at the beginning of this chat, I've started a POC of what could we do for apps versus add-ons and what should we call them and everything. We were I won't repeat the history because we talked about that last week, but the history of we started with add-ons, then we made apps, then we thought, should we go back to add-ons again and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully we can decide what the solution is, but I'm hoping particularly after the Helm file experience, I'm hoping everything could just be an app and our life becomes easier and then we phase out add-ons. And then but anyways, yeah, I won't regurgitate the proposal just yet, but I'll post it in the chat, the proposal.
It is worth giving that a look over and adding any comments on that because yeah, it's a common thing that we keep on talking about around apps and add-ons. So I think that's James's attempt to try and get some movement and clarity around that. There was a really important question. Sorry, sorry, go on, Victor.
Yeah, quick question from me. I've seen that Jake's create cluster for Minikube and Minishift is deprecated. That's cool. But does the rest stay for now? Like Jake's create cluster AKS? Because
I would
those
say,
are using
yes,
in the background.
I would say EKS, GKE, and stuff like that, which is really used, probably we can keep for now because it's kind of a syntactic sugar for some people. And they,
yeah,
like
the reason why I'm asking is because unless I'm mistaken, they're using JX install in the background, right? I mean,
no. So you can skip it.
AKS.
You can skip it. There is a flag, like also in the create cluster.
So we're deprecating JX create cluster AKS unless it is with do not install Jenkins X.
So there is a flag, it's called skip installation when you create a cluster. If you don't specify that flag, basically it will run install after create clusters. But we want to kind of deprecate that flag from the existing create cluster. So I think there is a PR up for that.
I've just realized there's 2 minutes left. There was a really important question that somebody had, and there's probably going to be some more questions. So one of them was, how do we protest against a deprecation, or how does somebody say, okay, give some reasons maybe to say, can we keep this, or what's the alternative? How's that best communicated? I guess putting another way, the moment that spreadsheet said the deprecation is going to be happening and removal is going to start on the 1st, which is in 7 days or 6 days on some of them. I'm just wondering, do we give people more time to be able to raise issues? Is that the right way, or how do they?
I think raising an issue would be a good first step, and having the discussion in the issue. That way we can get an inventory of what the more critical commands are, and making sure we have good alternative flows in place or use cases. And if we don't, we shouldn't delete anything if we don't have a good alternative.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, using the last minute as well, I'm just trying to find out as many people to have a review that list as possible, because from the 1st of February, it's been suggested that those commands are going to start going. So we just want to minimize this impacting people. Sorry, go on, Cara.
So Cosmin actually had made an issue listing the commands made late last year. So it had been up in the community, but I don't know how widely this had been known. So at this point, I would say definitely make issues. I would make issues more to the JX repo. I think they'll probably get more vision than to the docs. But yeah, definitely start talking about it. Like raise issues and raise your reasoning. And as Dean was saying, we should address people's concerns.
Can we do almost like a daily comment on the Slack channel to say, please, if you haven't seen this list of deprecation, can you please review it? Maybe something on Twitter as well.
Yeah.
Maybe in the docs we can have a pop-up in the main window.
Yeah, anything just to really kind of highlight that. And one last comment: is it worth us delaying that 1st of February, or are you happy to? Are we happy to kind of start removing things from the 1st of Feb?
I would suggest like install, we should delay a bunch of comments, like probably some which are tricky to remove. Like install, probably upgrade, platform and stuff, which is still used for all the platforms. I think stuff like delete Knative add-on and Minikube and Minishift, they can go. There's no big harm, but probably I would say install, we should give more, at least 3 months.
Okay, let's try and do a daily thing, try and raise awareness, everybody, of making sure people are reviewing that list, and all of us take a look at that list as well, if possible. Feedback, anything on issues, and we take it from there. Awesome. A little bit over, sorry about that, but it was really great discussion. Andrew, thanks for the demo. I thought that was brilliant. And lots more to come on the Helm file, Helm 3, and more experiments as well, and more attention around migration, to David's point as well, and deprecations. We need to look at that. Thanks very much for awesome office hours. See you next time.
Bye.